Hi everyone. So as Ronan said, I'm Lorraine Bull. I'm the Biodiversity Officer for Dublin City Council, and I've actually got the slides as a PDF. There's some extra information on the slides, and I'm happy for that PDF to be shared because we'll try and keep to time if I can. So for biodiversity events for Heritage Week, that's a good start. That's not working. Oops. There it is. Wrong one. So just to say, I'm a biodiversity officer. Dublin City Council has had a few biodiversity officers now, but we're part of now a larger network. So there's currently 29 biodiversity officers across 24 local authorities. So you may have a local biodiversity officer that you can link in with for biodiversity events, both for Biodiversity Week, which is next month in May, and then also Heritage Week as well. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And some of the councils are also recruiting as well. Okay, what's going on with this? There we go. So I was going to do this because I thought we might have a little bit more time, but it was just to really gauge how many people are from, say, the Dublin or an urban city area versus maybe people from the country. So are you mainly from Dublin or from other places? Yeah? Yeah? Because you can have slightly different events depending on where you're based. So just to say, this year's theme is connections, roots and networks, and that's actually perfect for biodiversity. So ecological corridors or wildlife corridors are really, really important for biodiversity, especially in urban environments in particular, although they are important for rural environments too. So this is just a screenshot of St Anne's Park in Clontarf, and as you can see around the edges of all of the field margins there, you have both hedgerows and also trees. So these are, when we're talking about ecological and wildlife corridors, they're routes from one place to another. So that could be a river, that could be a canal, that could be along a railway line, and also through public parks as well. This is kind of relevant because you can actually cater some of your events, particularly to this theme when it comes to biodiversity. So just to say, you can then look at a kind of a housing estate and how that's linked to a park. And you can actually link in your biodiversity events to that as well. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So just to give you an idea at a very, very small scale, this is a tiny pocket park that we have here in Dublin. So you could, have a community group, have a residents association group along a particular road, and you could actually even start, in your own locality looking at ecological corridors. So just to say, these are some of the events that I've hosted. So I've either done the event myself or we've hosted with other organisations for Heritage Week. So it was interesting actually about the title of the event and making that interesting, because that's certainly been helpful for me, even if I've been searching for the event online, because there is such a volume of events. So graveyards as living places, that was an event where we were actually looking at the importance of graveyards for biodiversity. But you've got really, really nice links then in with built heritage. So these events were done in Donnybrook Cemetery and also St Canice's in Finglas. So they're really historic graveyards. So you can link in both the importance of rare flora that grows on walls in the cemeteries and graveyards, but also the important wildlife corridor that you have. So you might get a lot of bats that are roosting in graveyards. You might get animals that are using the graveyards both for either for denning or for nesting, and then also using it for foraging as well. But then you can also look at the history of the graveyard. And also what you can also do is learn, you could do identification of lichens, say in a graveyard. You generally get a lot of lichens in a historic graveyard. You could do identification of the rare flora. So another really, really good, and it ties in with the theme this year, is rivers as havens. So rivers and river walks are very popular. So we've done river walks, along the River Tolka, along the Dodder, also along parts of the Liffey. So this really, again, is essential ecosystems and wildlife corridors. You can talk about the species that are actually in the water. You can talk about the species that use the riparian zones or the river banks. So you can do a whole myriad of different things. You could do bat walks. You could do in Dublin, you could do a walk on salmon, for example, because we have salmon in some of our rivers. So you have a variety of events that you could do if you're looking at rivers. And again, if there's place names or history of the area, you can link that in as well. And again, that's part of like the connection to the past. And I find that these walks in particular, you tend to get good attendance at them as well. So Santry River, this was another project that we did along a river. This was a bit more, and actually we have LawPro here today, and I was going to actually reference LawPro later. So some really great events, brilliant for families and gets really high numbers, is both pond dipping and also river dipping as well. So that's where you're actually collecting some invertebrate samples, putting them in trays, and people, you can see in the photograph there, there's two small kids rummaging in around all the invertebrates and all of the leaf litter that comes out of the river. And that can be a really, really good way to engage people. So they find out about what's living in the river and also the importance of water quality for our rivers as well. Another good activity is how to build a wildlife pond. So that I found has been very, very successful. And again, that's something that you could do within a local area, like as a local community. But then also you could do that for residents as well. So I'm conscious there's a lot of you might be community groups, both across Dublin and also parts of the country. And actually building ponds is becoming a more important theme. And it could actually start as part of your local Heritage Week event. And it could really engage with members of your local community. So bat walks, to put it into context, bat walks last year, I did a series of bat walks in some of the key Dublin parks, and I had cancellation lists of 60 and 80 people. Bat walks, August is the perfect month for bats. The only challenge you might have is actually getting a really good bat surveyor at that time of year who can do the education piece, because August is also the month where you survey professionally for bats. But if you can, both as local Bat Conservation Island local groups, like here in Dublin, there's the Dublin Bat Group, and they will also host walks. But again, that's where your biodiversity officer could help, because they can actually create links. Or like what I do with some of the groups is I can actually fund the bat surveyor to do that walk and talk for the group as part of the city biodiversity action plan. But bat walks are extremely popular for all ages. Also as well, like there could be projects that your biodiversity officer is running. So for example, with the Irish Midlands Ringing Group, we support them to do bird ringing in our parks. So that's monitoring the population. So that's happening at different times of the year. But what we do for both Biodiversity Week and Heritage Week is bird ringing demonstrations. So that's where the birders will come down and actually show people how they capture the birds. They're all licensed ornithologists, how they ring the birds and what the importance of that is. Now I've done engagement for this both in Merrion Square Park, down on Bull Island, and also in parts of Tolka Valley. And again, we've had really, really good engagement from people. You can also do, we have tree trails in Dublin City Council parks. There might be tree trails in other local authority parks as well. So again, you could organise a tree walk. You might have a tree officer in your locality as well, in your local authority. Certainly in the Dublin local authorities we do. So they might also do events, walks and talks based on trees, but there's also the Tree Council of Ireland that could do that as well. And then in the bottom, just to say actually, so the sort of top left picture, the really cute little guy, that's a long-tailed tit. So that's at one of our ringing demonstrations. And then the bottom right photograph is actually workshops that we would do with the National Biodiversity Data Centre. So as part of the city plan, I would do different workshops throughout the year, but you can try and cater workshops for Heritage Week. So here we're actually looking at dragonflies and damselflies in one of the local parks. So again, that could be something that you talk to your biodiversity officer about, or even the data centre. I noticed on the Heritage Council website that they talk about migratory birds. So certainly within Dublin, if you're doing, say, a talk about the light-bellied brent geese, August is slightly out of that season. However, you could have sort of a general talk or a webinar, and then you could follow that up by having a site visit sort of the following month. So you could do almost like a two-part kind of event. But also as well, you could have a look at how migratory birds or migratory populations use both the roads, the rivers, and other linear features. So when birds are migrating, they'll use different techniques in order to know where they are. So we believe that the Brent geese are using some of the rivers basically as landmarks, almost like motorways to us. So that could be something that you have a talk on. Again, if you've got a biodiversity officer in your locality, there could be a project that they're running that you could link in with. So this is the Swifts in the City project, and this was, again, a two-phase project. So the first phase was us collecting data, but then the second phase is actually working with community groups and identifying places around Dublin where you can actually put up Swift boxes. So we've linked in with schools and with community groups. So that could be an event that you do. You could arrange to have, say, Swift boxes, or you could have swallows in an area. You could have other birds, the range of bird species. You could put up other bird boxes, say, in a local park, in conjunction with the Parks Department, and then you could do a celebration of that animal. You could to sort of herald, the value of that local area for that species. So citizen science has really grown over the last number of years. So this could be something as well, is that you do like a citizen science-based. So you've got your walks and talks, you've got workshops, and then you've also got surveys as well. So again, your local biodiversity officer or a local environmental NGO, so like Birdwatch Ireland, Bat Conservation Ireland, could be running a project that you could maybe link into. So this one for us in Dublin City, I actually host public workshops. We've got some actually coming up in the next few weeks to tell people about both our river birds and also our birds of prey projects. But this could also be a webinar. You could host a webinar during Heritage Week, and then what people could do then is engage with that project and go out and do a survey in their local area, and then send in that sighting as well. Because a lot of this is biodiversity awareness raising, but then it's also really good to have a kind of a tangible positive benefit for biodiversity. So I've had community groups across Dublin that have done citizen science projects that have discovered species that we didn't know were in Dublin, and actually one of them, a species we didn't know we had nationally. So community groups, but also churches, etc., can have a really positive impact in that way. So just to say, there's some free public resources, like if you're looking at identifying river birds and also birds of prey. There's on Birdwatch Ireland, we developed this with Birdwatch. It's basically an ID guide to help people identify birds. So there are some free public resources out there. And again, your biodiversity officer could help with that information. And actually the Heritage Council would have lists of those as well. I was talking to the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. So most local authorities are signed up to the plan, and we do initiatives for that. But what your group could decide to do is host a workshop to identify pollinators in your local area. So again, you could do this just in your local communities. And actually, you could then start looking at how to improve your local area for pollinators. So that links in with the connection themes, because again, you could sort of say, well, look, how can we improve this area and improve its ecological corridor? So the All Ireland Pollinator Plan is run by the National Biodiversity Data Centre. Now, they don't, unfortunately, have a lot of capacity to run a lot of workshops. However, there are local ecologists and also environmental NGOs that might be able to help you in terms of identification. There's also an online course for identifying bumblebees. So again, you could do something around pollinators, do some sort of identification of bumblebees. You could even print off the resources that are on the website links there. So it's pollinators.ie and also pollinators.ie. There's actually a video which helps you identify bumblebees. And you could do that, especially if you're looking at family events. You could print off, photographs of the bees, and you could get families and children to see if they can actually spot some of those, within their local vicinity. So again, I'm all about also doing a bit of local action, so doing the awareness raising, but then also having some really tangible outcomes for that. So again, in your local area, you could look at areas that you could improve for biodiversity, areas that could be mowed less. You could do like a survey. As part of Heritage Week, you could do a little local survey with your group, and you could look at whether or not you have native plants such as white clover, dandelions, nettles to grow, because they're actually really crucial for biodiversity. So talk to the biodiversity officer or the heritage officer. They can actually advise on who to talk to about reduced mowing or coordinate that, arrange that for you. Just to say, just while we're on pollinators, so wildflower seed mix planting is not favoured. There was sort of a miscommunication in some of that messaging. So really, when it comes to preserving and helping biodiversity, we want to keep some of our local, what we call indigenous, so that's local area native plants. So again, if you're looking at doing an event for Heritage Week, say like tree planting, for example, which is another event you might be able to do, it's not the best time of year. You really want to be doing that sort of up to March, really. But if you were doing something along those lines, is just then keeping the native flowers there. And just to say, if you're looking at doing any of that, there's also information on pollinators.ie, and also the RHS has those. Again, you could look at providing more natural habitat. So you'd be doing this as part of an event. So you could, if you're a group of people, you could host a bumblebee identification workshop and then identify also areas that you could improve, or again, you could get a local ecologist to come down and do that as part of Heritage Week. So there's some more information on there, because I know we're running out of time. So there's plenty of options to choose from. You can do, biodiversity walks out in nature and inspiring people to get out into nature. There's also talks and webinars that you could do. That could be on a range of species, but also on a current topic, so such as biodiversity and its relationship with climate change. You could host a workshop, so you could teach a skill set, so that could be pond building, that could be even pond dipping, where you're identifying species and learning about how important species are in an area. You could do a citizen science survey, and that could be on any species. That could be something as basic as going out identifying trees, seeing what trees are out in an area, or as I say, you can get an ecologist and look at really specific species. And then inspiring local action. You can do local litter cleanups. You could do looking at improving local areas for wildlife, looking at making and putting up bird boxes. But if you're going to do that, just make sure boxes, either bird boxes or bat boxes, are put up in the right place. And just be conscious, if you're actually screwing or nailing a box into a tree, you're causing a wound in the tree. So that reduces the lifespan of the tree. So there could be straps, or we're trialling rubber straps to try and prevent damage happening for trees. And it's the same for fairy doors as well. They look cute, but unfortunately, if you're screwing or nailing into a tree, that can actually damage it. So you could also do Leave No Trace workshop. There's resources on the Leave No Trace website as well. You could do a nature and art project, and that can work very well. You can go out into an area, get the kids all to pick up the leaves and actually create an art piece as well. And then also Wildlife Book Club. And I have to thank Ruth from Sligo. She's the biodiversity officer in Sligo, because that was her suggestion. It's a great idea. I'm not a reader, so I don't do book clubs, but it is a great idea. So biodiversity officers, I'm being called time. So biodiversity officers may be able to support, certainly in Dublin, we're able to do that. So either through doing an event in conjunction with your group, or offering financial or other support. So that could be equipment as well. You might want to go out and do a bat survey, and you might need, bat detectors, for example. But heritage officers may also be able to support as well. And then if you're looking for specialists, so say if you want to do a particular, event, a walk or talk, there's the Heritage in Schools programme, and they have the list of specialists, within your local counties and local areas. And then also connecting with local branches of the environmental groups. So both Bat Conservation Ireland, they've got a bat panel, which is a really cool name, but it's a list of people who can go out and identify bats. There's also Birdwatch Ireland. They have a lot of local groups that do events. There's the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group, the Irish Wildlife Trust, and also, as I said before, the Local Authority Water Programme. We don't have them yet in Dublin, because I'd need to ramp up numbers, but some parts of the country, there's ESCA, what they call ESCA kits, so the ecological equipment that you can actually rent out from your local library. But if you've got a local group within Dublin that's looking for equipment, you can write to me, biodiversity@dublincity.ie, and I can look at arranging that for you. There could also be grants as well through the Heritage Council, both through the local authority and then the Community Foundation for Ireland. And just for DCC, because we are in DCC, this is kind of how we work with communities. So there's biodiversity officers, heritage officers, there's also local area officers as well that will organise events for community groups that could do potentially events for Heritage Week and also fund those as well. We have the libraries, there's also a climate action office that has community personnel. There's obviously Parks Department, which I'm based. And then in Dublin, there's also the Dublin Bay Biosphere. So the whole of Dublin Bay is a UNESCO biosphere, and there's also events and education workshops. So, for example, I'm developing a bat education workshop for scout groups as well. But again, that's something that, you know, is an event that that you could get involved in. So that's it. I'm over time now. But yeah, if you have any questions, the PDF, as I say, will be there, and I'll be here afterwards if you want to ask any questions. So.